Thank you both very much. Thank you, Mr. Senator. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mayor, for being here this morning, and the Chancellor, and of course your staff for the good work that they're doing. I think the Chairman led up to an issue on transparency and trying to figure out how you traverse the system, how much money comes into the system, how does money gets distributed within the system. And you have to be a pretty good financial expert to try to figure that out. It's very difficult on the websites to figure out how the money's coming in and money's going out. And I just want to move over not to the operating dollars, but to the construction dollars, the SCA and the facilities. How is that better today or worse, and how do you track that? How does a simple person understand where the construction dollars are coming, how those construction dollars are going out, versus the previous system that you had versus today's system?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that, one, we believe in transparency. We want to always work with you and your colleagues and all local communities to improve transparency in any way we can. But the proof is in the pudding. You know, the School Construction Authority, as you know, has really greatly improved its work over the last decade or more. And the amount of output now and the speed with which they're able to complete projects it's just night and day from the past. So the constant creation of new school facilities is the best evidence in the world, but if there's ways that we can better show that trajectory, we're happy to do it. We've continued to add resources into the School Construction Authority. We have a very aggressive building plan to address overcrowding realities in many districts. But I would say, you know, as with everything we do with our city budget, we try to regularly report to the people what the actual impact of the dollars has been, and we want to find ways to make that as clear as possible.
Well, we do have, obviously, I represent Brooklyn, and the Chancellor knows it well, District 20, 21, 22. District 20 obviously is severely overcrowded. We put a tremendous amount of money into District 20 in building new schools and additions, and we're still the most overcrowded school district in the city. What is the plan over the next 10 years, and how do we, and especially with the changing communities, how do we deal with the overcrowded conditions?
I think one of the things that we've done much more carefully is we've asked superintendents to get involved. Remember, in the past, you did not have one superintendent in charge of one geographical district. So one of the first, in fact, the first structural change that we made is to make sure there's one person in charge of a geographical district where all the issues come to them. As many of you, I hope, have already met with superintendents that you are now much more close to. But I think also in District 20, there had been a particular issue that where we had land, and I think also Senator Montgomery probably is aware of some of this as well, parents did not want to cross certain streets. In your area, they don't want to cross 3rd Avenue, and yet some of the land is on the other side of 3rd Avenue. So some of the discussions that we particularly are doing now with your CEC is to talk about how do we change people's minds about where good locations may be, and who would be the right students to go in that direction. So I do think that's one of the conversations we're having, certainly with Karina, the superintendent, and that just, how do we do that with parents, and how soon can we get it done? But there are some particular situations that we're thinking about for District 20.
If you can, I'd like to have a breakdown if it's 20, 21, and 22, and we get an opportunity as to what your 10-year plan is for the construction, the SCA, and how we're going to deal with the overcrowding and the changing communities. I think that's important for me. I guess it's important for all of my colleagues that are from the city of New York, but specifically in my communities because of the overcrowding.
Senator, could I just jump in and just give you another fact here? We just, as you know, we just announced our executive budget, and now the current capital plan for the SCA is at $14.9 billion. That runs through fiscal 2019. It is now pegged at 44,000 new seats. Obviously, your district is going to be one of those focal point areas. And we, in the last budget that we just announced, added 11,800. So that 44,000 includes an increased commitment of 11,800 seats over just the next few years. Then we're going to have another capital plan behind that, of course, that will keep going. But I want to say personally, as you know, I know your district well, and I served a neighboring district in the council, and I know you're in a very popular part of the world, and we've seen an explosion in the school community there. We had great response on pre-K. We were able to constantly add capacity. We're going to keep doing that. So I just want you to hear my personal commitment that we know the city has changed in many ways. The demand for school seats is different than what it was even 20 years ago. We have to constantly make adjustments. The good news is, as we saw with pre-K, we were able to very rapidly make those changes, in part because we worked with religious schools, charter schools, community-based organizations. We were able to do a lot with pre-K and with after-school, even outside of the traditional school buildings. But we know there's also a real need for additional, just traditional public school seats. So I want you to know it's going to be an area of continued investment.
The areas that, thank you very much. The area of concern, obviously, in communities like myself and that I represent and others, obviously, is how we're going to deal with the gifted and talented classes seem to be reduced, not increased, and there seems to be more requests for them in my community. There also seems to be, how does that work into our STEM programs and our STEM programs across the city? How are we putting more emphasis on our STEM programs and making it more ability for, or more opportunities for the families and the children to be in these STEM schools?
Well, the STEM programs, we developed a framework for STEM education. We now have a program that starts STEM in kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. We have put out training programs last week, the week that teachers were off. We had 400 teachers who came to STEM training at Stuyvesant High School, many of them elementary school teachers. STEM is not a separate subject. It's not you go to a classroom
Correct.
and you get STEM. It's how do you infuse STEM into everything you do. I know in your district they're having estuary day, I think a Saturday or 2 Saturdays now, because I know I'm going to be there. So how do you combine that with your science classroom, with your arts classroom, with your English language arts classrooms? So it's how do we train teachers to use STEM in every facet of their lives? It's why you want a maritime middle school, right? Why you have a harbor school. So I think it's really, well, how do you look at this from K all the way to 12? And how do you retrain teachers who maybe haven't really been exposed to any of this? And also, how do you use technology in a creative way so that all students have access no matter what neighborhood they live in? But more importantly, I think the professional development that we've done for teachers. Last year, we had a one-day training session on STEM. 1,000 teachers showed up. And this summer, we plan on having 2 weeks of STEM training for teachers citywide, elementary, middle, and high school. So it's a big emphasis. It's not a room in a school. It's how do you get a school to change. The Brooklyn Navy Yard, for example, is one of the places that's going to be one of our STEM hubs. And we have 5 high schools that are heavily involved in that, but we expect all the middle schools to be connected to that, and then the elementary schools to be connected to the middle school. So it's a very big effort, and it's going to be comprehensive.
Staying on that course, if we're going to do the school construction and we're going to build new schools, hopefully a number of them will be STEM schools going into our community so our children across the city have opportunities, especially in districts where they are severely overcrowded. They need a balanced system, so I would hope that we would do that.
Can I just
Absolutely.
add, absolutely, and say this?
And the
we-
AP courses obviously lead up to that. Determine they have the STEM courses. It's easier, obviously, for the children to get through the AP courses as well when they get to the high school. But go ahead, sir.
No, Senator, you're totally on the right target. The first Computer Science for All, which again, we're doing working very closely with the technology sector in the city, that's going to pervade the entire curriculum of the school system. But second, we are going to be investing a lot more in career and technical education because we believe, even though we want every child to have the opportunity and the chance to go to college if that's right for them. First of all, a lot of kids go to a career and technical education program and go to college. Some kids go to a career and technical education program and go right into a career. And interestingly, technology is one of the great examples. With just a 2-year associate's degree in a STEM subject, you can, in many cases, go into a good job in our technology sector. And we've been supporting CUNY's efforts to expand those initiatives. But my point would be, as we expand career and technical education programs and career and technical education high schools, standalone programs, standalone high schools, more and more of those are going to be in the kinds of areas where the economy is going. It's obviously technology, it's life sciences, it's healthcare, it's film and TV. There's a whole host of areas that we can see our economy strengthening in the city. So you're going to see more of those like P-Tech, you're going to see more of those standalone STEM-oriented high schools and STEM-oriented programs because there's huge demand, and they're also the best way to get our young people to good jobs.
And I will also say that one of the best partners that we've had in this work is actually one of the Brooklyn institutions, Kingsborough Community College. And they are partnering now with a tremendous amount of our middle schools and high schools. And also, when you want to attract parents to certain high schools, and I'll use as an example John Dewey, which was under-enrolled for many years, and now because of their CTE programs, they're starting a STEM program, they already have a culinary program. We're trying to bring more programs to them. They're seeing a real increase in their enrollment. So I think this is all the way of the future, people, and also gives students options. You know, you go to high school to go to college. No, you go to high school to get a really good education, so then you have choices. And your choice is you can go to college and then get a job, or you can go, you know, and join a union, which gets a good paying job. But students should have options, and this is part of what the work that we're trying to do, particularly with CTE.
I want to thank you on the, I'm going to move to another area real quickly, is homeless, the homeless families. And we've seen, in my community, moved a group of homeless families in from the Bronx. When you move families into a community, you also impact those school districts, and therefore you're denying the kids that live in the community the ability to get into the school, and you're really upsetting the family structure if you're moving them too far out of what their school system is. So I want to thank you for doing that. You worked with our community to make sure that we got those kids back to closer to their school districts and back to their school districts. Do you have a plan to do that in the future to make sure
Yes.
that we're not
And-
impacting schools that we're moving families into, but making sure we keep those kids close to their school district?
Exactly right, and thank you for your focus on this, Senator, and for working with us. The biggest element of the plan is to reduce homelessness.
Definitely, and you're on your way to doing that.
And
You're doing
we
it.
feel proud of the fact we've stabilized the situation. We want to go farther, but to prevent it before it happens. But then, you're right, when we have folks, God forbid, end up in shelter, let's do the logical thing and at least make that shelter as close to the home community as possible. That's not how the system was oriented for years. We're retooling it in that direction rapidly. But the other thing we're recognizing is while there are kids who, you know, very sadly are a distance from their home school district, it's our obligation to provide them direct transportation. So we started, in fact, a specific school bus service to get those young people to their schools so they didn't have huge commutes on public transportation. But further, we just added to this executive budget just in the last 2 weeks, over $10 million for direct tutoring efforts and attendance-oriented efforts in the shelters. So we understand if a child's gone through that kind of dislocation, that the odds start to go up that their attendance might get questionable or their academic achievement might suffer. So we're literally going to put attendance specialists and tutors in the shelters in the after-school and evening hours to work with kids, to make sure they go to school, to make sure they're doing their homework. Very hands-on focus. The goal ultimately to have fewer and fewer young people in shelter. But one last thing, Senator, as you've seen, what we used to think of as homelessness has changed profoundly as the cost of housing's gone up, as there's been so many economic challenges. Now more and more people in shelter are members of families, even working members of families, and young people go to school. So as the shelter reality has changed, we need to apply more resources to get right in there with them and help keep those kids consistent in their education, looking to the day when we can get them back into a stable home.
Last question, because I know my colleagues want to ask more questions, and I apologize for taking so long. The pre-Ks, we can't really track out how much money's been spent on the pre-K, where the money's coming from on the construction dollars, how we're moving these pre-Ks along, and what is it doing to co-locations for our charter schools? How does that play into this as well?
My broad answer is we can, again, we're happy to go over any figures with you about how we've spent resources specifically on pre-K. It's been, as you can see, very successful. But I don't think there's been a lot of interaction with the co-location issues, because what happened essentially is we had schools with pre-K classrooms. In some of the traditional public schools, there was maybe one more classroom or two more classrooms we could get available with some creative work, but nothing that fundamentally changed the reality of the school because it's only one grade level. What we had to do in many cases, as you know, is work with a charter school, a parochial school, or community-based organization. So I don't think there's been much interaction with the co-location issue. What I can say is that the resources that have been spent very efficiently because we were able to reach those parents in locations that work for them. So, you know, people voted with their feet. The fact that we got almost up to 70,000 kids now meant that the locations worked. It was a free marketplace, if you will, and parents chose ones that worked for them. Almost 70,000 kids now in those programs, and the parent satisfaction levels are very high based on the independent surveys we've done. But we're happy to lay out to you exactly how we use the resources to get those different pieces put together.
And the co-locations are working fine.
Co-locations in general, if the question is co-locations in general, I would say this is always an area of sensitivity, but what I feel is much better over the last couple of years, and I will give the Chancellor and the Deputy Chancellors a lot of credit, is, you heard the complaints, I heard the complaints about people getting an announcement that their school is going to change without any warning or real discussion. Now, before any decisions are made, literally up to the level of a Deputy Chancellor arrives at the building, meets with the parents, walks through the building to talk about what changes might happen. There's an extensive process with the CECs involved, the PEP, and as I said, in some cases, CEC objections and parent concerns have led the PEP to change the outcome, which was not something you saw previously, and to improve the plan.
All right, let me just say there are several things about co-locations that were really changed. Actually, Senator Comrie, you're living through one of these now. Let me be very clear. There are several things that have been changed going in this administration than prior. And one of the most important ones is there's a lot more discussion before this has happened. It doesn't happen in the middle of the night. It doesn't happen all of a sudden. I think the other thing that I think is extremely important is that whatever is done in the charter school, or if that's the co-location, has to be, the same amount of money has to be spent in the other schools. So all of a sudden, you have a science lab going up in a school that's been dying for a science lab forever. And you have upgrades in their bathrooms, because if it's done here, it has to be done here. The other thing we did starting last year, we put out a grant proposal that if a charter school and a public school together would write a grant on how they would share some kind of resources, that we would give them this extra money. So for example, we have grants that came in to do buddy classes with the middle schools and elementary schools. We had grants to run after school programs. We're trying to make co-locations, and this includes standalone high schools. We have high schools with 6 high schools in them. We said, what do you need together that we might help you fund that alone you cannot do? So we're really looking at all kinds of co-locations and say, how do we make it better for everybody? But it takes a lot of work. Some work better than others, but this is an ongoing challenge, and I think it's one, though, that we've done a really good job on in the last year in bringing people to the table beforehand. Now, if there's going to be a principal of a new school, we bring them to the table to meet the principal of the existing school. What do you guys want to do together? We certainly did that in Bushwick.
Well, we're hearing is there are less co-locations, and we're hearing that it's more difficult for co-locations. And if you can give that to us, a list of the co-locations today, what happened last year, the year before that. I have to leave. I have another number of events today, so I'll be in and out of the room. But I want to thank you for your testimony today, and if you can get those numbers to us, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hamilton.
Yes, Senator.
Good morning, Mayor de Blasio and Chancellor Farina. Congratulations on 50 years of service to our children in education. Education is very important to me. That's why I ran for the Community School Board in District 17. At that time, we had the 5th best school in New York State, the Crown School for Law and Journalism. As time moves on, I'm the senator from Brownsville. I represent Sunset Park, Gowanus, Park Slope, Prospect Heights, Crown Heights, and beautiful Brownsville. So I cover a diverse area. And I've been working with the CSA, the UFT. They've been doing a phenomenal job in educating our kids. But one school in particular, and many schools, but one I'll point out to you, the Brooklyn New School, a very prominent school. Principal Anna Allen Brooke is concerned that the new policies with the DOE are, she has to tell kids from Crown Heights and Bed-Stuy they cannot attend her school anymore due to the policies that are being put forth by the DOE. But kids from Williamsburg in the more affluent areas can. So as we see gentrification happening in our schools, the policies are sometimes having an adverse effect on the kids who are the best and brightest coming from minority neighborhoods, really having no options moving forward. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm also the ranker for the Mental Health Committee. And what we noticed, I have an advisory committee, is that teachers don't know how to take a class in mental health to identify. We know at a young age, young children exhibit maybe mental disabilities, that if they're addressed at an early age, they could be helped rather than moving forward. So myself and Assemblyman Crespo have introduced a mental health bill, which is S6234, which will require teachers to identify behavioral issues versus mental issues. So a child is not continuously suspended because the underlying mental issue is not addressed. Myself, when my parents were divorced, I started acting out and fighting. But no one took the time to say what's going on in your life. And I think that we need more of that holistic approach. Also being in Brownsville, you know, statistically, the school reading scores have gone down under merit control. PS 284 from 22% under 6%. PS 218 from 18.9% to under 6%. PS 73 from 18% to under 5%. So what we're seeing in Brownsville is a reduction in the reading scores. I'm not sure, is that because of the increase in the homeless shelters? But seeing those scores, we start at the campus in Brownsville. And the campus is 42 community-based organizations working with 3 schools to have technology and wellness centers with the Brooklyn Public Libraries.
Senator, would you be kind enough, because you're raising a number of issues, could we just pause for a moment and address those, and then we'll continue to answer anything else you have?
Right.
On the point about the last point, I'll work backward a little bit quickly. I know the Chancellor wants to offer her thoughts. There is no question, as I said, that we are dealing with a challenge in many communities of homelessness by families that did not used to exist. So you're absolutely right. This is an X factor in the equation. Almost 40,000 of the 58,000 people in shelter right now in New York City are family members, parents and children in families. That is putting a stress on particular districts in particular. That's why we're trying to add resources and approaches to address that. Now, but I would not agree with the idea that because some schools might have had some problems, that suggests that overall the strategies that we're putting in place aren't working, because I think the overwhelming evidence is that there's movement forward in the school system.
Oh, no, you're doing a great job, but we can always just fine-tune it a little bit.
There's no question we have a lot to do, and I want to note, that's why I raised
Right.
the Single Shepherd Initiative, for example, which Brownsville will be one of the leading edge areas for. This is trying to change the rules of the game entirely to say that a family and a young person will have support, direct, consistent support. The same exact individual will be with them from 6th grade all the way to 12th grade to help deal with any of the issues that come up, keep that child in the right place on their path forward. So we're making a number of investments, as I mentioned, the investments in the shelters. There's no question when I talk about equity and excellence,
Right.
that is a living, breathing idea that whenever you or anyone else identifies an area where we're not seeing sufficient equity, we need to go right at that. That's why we're working to change the numbers on the fair student funding formula, et cetera. But I would say the broad strokes on graduation rate, on test scores, although as you know, I believe in multiple measures, test scores are only one indication, but we have so many pieces of evidence that something is moving across all communities. Right basic plan, a lot more to do, and a lot more fine-tuning, as you say. On mental health, I want to, first of all, I thank you for your focus on it.
I want to thank your wife also.
Well, that's where I was going to go.
Thrive NYC, yes.
I thank my wife every day.
Okay.
And
That's a very wise position.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. You're right. I came to that realization early in marriage, sir.
So did I.
It's I was going to say, I also know that our anniversary is May 14th, and it's
Right.
22 years. So I wanted to just know I'm prepared. When we looked at the mental health challenges of the city, Charlene rightfully decided we needed to literally create a system. We have, a healthcare system, but that means physical health.
Right.
We do not have a mental health system.
Right.
The audacity of what she's doing, I have immense respect for it, is she is saying with her Thrive NYC plan that we're going to create from scratch effectively. We're going to pull together a bunch of pieces that exist but are not a system and create a system, give it the resources it needs. But the schools are a crucial piece of this.
Correct.
The 130 community schools, for example, all have mental health as one of the components that we're going to be adding into them. We believe that mental health services need to be available early.
Right.
To maximize exactly what you said, catching the difference between something that might be a temporary challenge and something that's a more profound challenge that needs to be addressed. And that's one of many things we'll do on mental health at the school level. So I just wanted you to, I appreciate your focus, and we want to work with you and Assemblyman Crespo, but we think you're exactly on the right track here. We think we have to focus on mental health in the school system if we're going to both help children learn, but also, God forbid, the tragedies we see that happen in adulthood in so many cases. How many people are in Rikers Island? How many people are homeless? How many people are unemployed because their mental health needs were not addressed early? So that's core to what we want to do. Finally, as I'll pass to the Chancellor, on the question of the Brooklyn New School or any other school, again, our equity imperative is we do not want to see any formula that advantages one group over another, particularly folks who are privileged over folks who are less privileged. A lot of exciting things are happening in the school system now to bring all different kinds of kids into the same school. A lot of new approaches are being innovated under Chancellor Farina. But if there is something, and she knows Brooklyn New School quite well for years, if there's something there that's happened that's causing an inadvertent outcome, we obviously want to work on that. So
I just want to thank your wife, the First Lady. I met with her a year and a half ago, and she had this initiative for Thrive NYC and for mental health. And she actually came to our district last week, and so I thank her for being in the forefront and putting it out there. So part of the campus and part of the mental health bill was your wife taking the initiative and bringing it to the forefront. So I want to thank her for that.
Thank you. I'll tell her. I appreciate that,
Yes.
Senator.
I think, first of all, with the specificity of Brooklyn New School, it's one of our pro schools. So Anna has a lot of leeway in how she does her lottery, because it is a lottery school, it's not a zone school. And she was one of the beginning people to do a pros initiative.
Right.
And we actually put out this year that other schools who want to replicate her pros initiative for diversity are free to do so. And so she is one of the guiding lights on that issue. I want to be clear that, we keep putting more and more on the teacher's plate and asking teachers to take more courses on more things. And one of the things that I think we really need to stress is that this training has to be part of the teacher education college experience. If you're going
It
to
is.
train to be
Yes,
a teacher,
it is.
that you need to have a certain amount of courses and credits, and we're working with the CUNY system to see how they can infuse some of this as part of their teacher training so that we don't have to play catch-up when they first go into our schools. The other commitment is, and we started last year and it continued this year, to increase the number of guidance counselors, not to work just with families and children, but to work with teachers. As a principal, I know one of the first things I did is have my guidance counselors meet on a weekly basis with all my first-year teachers, because they're falling apart. They're just babies themselves. They need to have their hands held. They need to be trained. And what do you do when a child cries in a class, or a child comes to school who you think may have been abused, and how do you handle that correctly? So there needs to be a lot of training. But I think added to that, and going back specific to the districts that you talked about, we can't measure reading scores as a whole school. You'll have to measure progress child by child. Because what's happening in a lot of our schools now, a parent will move from this school to this school. So it's the child's progress that we have to measure, not the schools. One of the schools in District 23, Jonathan Dill's school, is doing some unbelievable work.
Correct.
But every year he loses a certain number of kids because either parents move or other issues. And yet you have one of the most outstanding schools, Nadia Lopez's school there, who just was the Nobel Prize winner
Correct.
of education.
Yes, you're
So
right.
what we need to do, and this is something, District 13 asked me last night too, we need to start rebranding our schools. All of you need to go out there and talk about the great stuff that's happening in your local schools. Because if a school had a reputation 5 years ago, it still has the same reputation now when it's not necessarily the same school. So we need to do a lot more work about highlighting public education. I mean, one of the things we're doing with Mayor Levin, we're going to send some of the people to go see what's happening in some of the schools, like a Mark Twain. How do you replicate the good stuff, but how do we celebrate the stuff that's working that nobody knows about?
Yes, Chancellor. And I just want to finish up on, with the campus, we're focusing on technology and wellness. And what we're noticing in the community renewal schools, we have the computer labs, but no one to teach coding. And we know that coding and technology is the way to go in the future. And so I just look forward to working with the Department of Education. But then the second part of that, I have some schools where 23% of the kids come from homeless shelters. But there's only $100 per child additional funding. So the question is, how do we guidance counselors are great, but we need social workers and psychologists in those schools, because coming out of a shelter, you can have depression, anxiety, so many different mental illnesses, just the traumatic effect of being homeless. So I just wanted to find out if we're going to put a mental health percentage for children coming from shelters, children whose parents are incarcerated, children who are chronically absent. So we know the catchment area, the pool of students who are at risk. And I just think we should be putting more resources at that risk population overall to make it happen. And as we know right now, Brownsville has a lot of children who go to school who wind up incarcerated. And we know now that Rikers Island has more people with mental disabilities than any other mental health facility in the state. So we have people who need mental help in a debilitating environment, not getting the help they need, and it all stems from the classroom. Not saying from the classroom, but identifying these kids at the early age. And so that's why I'm really pro on mental health. I'm really pro on Thrive NYC to change the system in that we get these kids help at an early age.
Well, then let me just say three things quickly. In this budget, there is, depending on the number of homeless students, there's an uptick in schools' budgets to be able to deal with that issue in a different way. So that's number one. Number two, when it comes to Rikers, after my second visit there, we embarked on creating a committee to make major changes. So for example, a year ago on Rikers, and I'm talking about the teenage center, more or less the middle school and the high school part, the students were only in school 3 hours a day. Well, what do you do the rest of the time? So we increased the time for those students to 5 hours a day. We created a professional development plan for all the teachers. We now have what we call a master principal in that site. We actually purchased books, and I did that on a personal level because I'd gone to visit a school where all the books were on social justice issues and the kids couldn't read them fast enough. So we purchased books specifically so they would want to read them and take them back to their cells and read them there because they weren't allowed to carry books from one place to the other. So we worked with Commissioner Ponte. We developed a whole new system, and I'm very proud. We could do a lot more, and we need to do a lot more. The other thing I'll say that the pre-K initiative, and again, thanks to the First Lady, is also focusing on parenting skills. Once a month, we have parents come to pre-K centers and also to community centers to learn how to read to your child, how to work to your child, how to talk to your child. Because in a lot of communities, there's a sense of hopelessness that really people then don't do the next step. So how to have parents support groups for each other is something we're working on. But once again, I do think that in terms of how we encourage parents, we're encouraging Mommy and Me classes in some of the schools and some of the neighborhoods where there's space. 3-year-olds, come with your child, learn how to read to your child. We're doing that in Red Hook at PS 15. Mommy and Me classes. So there's a lot of things we're trying to do. But I think the most important thing, and I certainly give the First Lady, is saying the words out loud.
Right.
Because this was something nobody talked about.
Right.
They had all kinds of euphemisms. He doesn't act right, or he's a little strange, or his grandfather had this. And now we're able to say out loud, this is what it's called, and this is what you need to do about it. We're working with a lot of hospitals. A lot of hospitals come forth to help us with this.
So just to finish real quick, key point that yes, literally the pre-K teachers are being trained in how to identify the problems and start to get the help. And what we're trying to create is a dynamic where any principal, any teacher knows where to turn when they identify a child with a need. That could be that seamless. But I remind you again, we put, as I mentioned, the $10 million directly into, you mentioned the homeless kids, directly into the tutors and the attendance support in the shelter. We're putting social workers into 43 schools that have a high shelter population. So we're adding additional 33 new social workers to work with kids, to try and identify those problems that come out of homelessness. And the overall investment we're making in mental health throughout the school system. So look, and your point about Rikers is well taken. Much more mental health oriented programming and going on there than ever before. But what we're trying to do, and I know you believe in this, is actually identify the mental health issues that lead people into the criminal justice system and stop them from ending up in the criminal justice system to begin with. This is going to be work of years, but I can safely say already we're starting to see some impact of being able to keep people out of the criminal justice system because they're getting the mental health care they need. And certainly on Rikers, because we have to worry about recidivism, getting people actual rehabilitation that can only happen if they're getting proper mental health services.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chancellor. And I look forward to continuing working with you. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.